Loki Escape Branch. The first accidental timeline the Avengers created occurred during their time heist mission in 2012, when they intercepted events during the Battle of New York. Their objective was to retrieve the Space Stone from the Tesseract immediately after Loki's defeat.
Enough! You are all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
To do this, they coordinated two separate extraction points. One team retrieving the Mind Stone from the Scepter.
Above or below anchor diesel?
Stark, so help me God, you make one more wise. Verbal threat. If I feel threatened, show some respect. If I need to put you down, then I will.
That'll be
And another team retrieving the Tesseract after S.H.I.E.L.D. secured it. The plan failed when the Avengers' interference caused the briefcase containing the Tesseract to fall directly in front of Loki while he was still in custody. Loki immediately took the opportunity to pick up the Space Stone and teleport away. Because the Space Stone left the timeline with Loki, the sacred timeline was no longer intact at this moment. The branch formed the instant the stone was removed from its original path. This branch is defined by Loki becoming a loose variable with access to the Space Stone, creating an independent reality that diverges permanently from the original 2012 sequence. The branch does not resolve on its own because a branching timeline continues as long as one of the 6 Infinity Stones is displaced from its destined location in time. The TVA later retrieves Loki.
You're now moving at 1/16th speed. We're feeling all that pain in real time.
From this divergent branch, confirming that the event created a fully separate and sustained reality with no natural mechanism to correct itself.
Laufeyson is charged with sequence violation 72089.
According to whom?
This timeline then becomes the setting for Loki's introduction to the TVA, the origin of his variant classification, and the first disruption to the sacred timeline caused directly by the Avengers' time heist. S.H.I.E.L.D. Vault Timeline. The second accidental timeline branch originated when the Avengers failed to secure the Space Stone during the 2012 mission and were forced to travel further back in time to 1970. Their objective was to retrieve an earlier version of the Tesseract from the U.S. Army installation at Camp Lehigh, which served as a S.H.I.E.L.D. research facility during that period. This mission also required them to acquire Pym particles from Dr. Hank Pym's lab, since they no longer had enough particles to return to their original timeline. By extracting both the Tesseract and the Pym particles, they removed 2 critical objects from their destined points in history. A branch formed because these items were taken before their intended timelines could naturally progress. Removing the Tesseract from the 1970 vault briefly altered the artifact's historical trajectory. Similarly, removing Pym particles interfered with the limited supply that existed at that time. Creating a localized divergence. Under the TVA's rules, any Infinity Stone taken out of its intended path creates a long-term branch that cannot self-correct. Although Steve Rogers later returned both the Tesseract and the Pym particles to this exact point in 1970, the branch still occurred at the moment the items were removed. Returning them does not prevent the creation of a divergent reality. It only stops the branch from expanding further. The 1970 timeline therefore exists as a complete but contained branch that was stabilized once the items were restored. Thanos Extraction Branch. The next accidental timeline was created when the Avengers time heist team retrieved the Power Stone from Morag in 2014. During this mission, Nebula's cybernetic systems automatically synced with the network of her 2014 counterpart. This allowed Thanos, Gamora, and 2014 Nebula to access the memory recordings of the future Nebula, revealing the Avengers' entire plan. As a direct result, Thanos captured the variant Nebula, used her neural link to hack the time travel device, and transported his warship into the Avengers' present-day timeline. The moment 2014 Thanos used the Pym particle-equipped device to leave his original timeline, a permanent branch was created. This branch diverged because Thanos, Gamora, and Nebula were removed before their roles in the original history could be fulfilled. In the sacred timeline, Thanos collects the Infinity Stones, wipes out half of all life, and is later killed by Thor at the start of Avengers Endgame. Removing Thanos from 2014 prevents all of those events from occurring in that branch. It also eliminates the 2014 versions of Gamora and Nebula from their destined trajectories, since they exit the timeline alongside him. Because an entire set of major participants were displaced from their natural history, this branch becomes one of the most structurally unstable divergences created during the time heist. Even though the Avengers defeat this variant Thanos in the present, the original 2014 branch remains permanently altered, with no mechanism to correct its missing elements. Branches. When Steve Rogers returned the Infinity Stones and Mjolnir to their original points in time, he prevented the existing branches from expanding further, but he did not erase the branches themselves. Every branch that had already formed remained a separate reality, because a divergent event cannot be undone after it has occurred. The TBA's rules clarify that returning a displaced object only stabilizes the branch. It does not merge it back into the sacred timeline. Therefore, Steve created additional microbranches during the process of returning the stones, because his presence in each time period introduced new variables not originally present in the sacred timeline. Each return point required direct interaction with events that were not meant to include Steve. For example, returning the Reality Stone to Asgard placed Steve in direct proximity to Jane Foster during the events of Thor: The Dark World. Returning the Soul Stone to Vormir forced him to encounter Red Skull, an interaction that did not occur in the original sequence. Returning the Mind Stone to 2012 meant re-entering the same environment where Loki had escaped, while restoring the Space and Time Stones placed him at key historical branching points. Each of these interactions introduced short-lived divergences, small branches caused by Steve arriving, performing the return, and exiting. These branches halted growth once the stone was replaced, but the branches remained as independent, completed realities. The final and most significant branch created by Steve occurred when he chose not to return to the present after completing his mission. Instead, he remained in the past to live a full life with Peggy Carter. Because this choice contradicted the sacred timeline's established sequence, where Steve remains frozen until 2011 and never reunites with Peggy. His decision created a fully separate reality. This branch diverged from the sacred timeline the moment Steve stayed behind, and it continued for decades as he lived out an alternate personal timeline. This created a stable, long-term branch in which Steve and Peggy aged naturally, separate from all events of the main MCU continuity. Multiversal fractures. The next major set of timeline branches formed when Sylvie killed He Who Remains at the end of Loki Season 1. Until this moment, the sacred timeline was maintained as a single curated reality through the TVA's continuous pruning of any branch that deviated from He Who Remains' approved sequence of events. His death disabled the TVA's central control mechanism, removing the authority that regulated all temporal activity. Once this control ended, every suppressed or pruned branch was allowed to grow freely, and new branches began forming without restriction. These branches did not emerge from a single event, but from the absence of intervention. Any small deviation anywhere across time, any choice, action, or anomaly immediately generated a new branch. The result was an exponential expansion of alternate realities across the multiverse. Unlike earlier branches caused by the Avengers' actions, which originated from specific disruptions tied to Infinity Stones or displaced individuals, the Loki-related fractures formed simultaneously across the entire temporal structure. Every moment in time had the potential to branch once He Who Remains' oversight ended. This created a rapidly growing multiversal tree, where each branch could continue diverging indefinitely without pruning. This uncontrolled expansion later overwhelmed the TVA systems, as seen when their scanning network detected thousands of new branches forming within seconds. The multiversal fractures introduced here represent the largest scale divergence event in the MCU to date, affecting every point in time rather than a single mission or artifact. Sacred Timeline. The final timeline relevant to the Avengers' accidental branches is the sacred timeline itself, the curated reality maintained by He Who Remains before his death. The sacred timeline is not a single continuous universe, but a tightly controlled sequence of events that He Who Remains allowed to exist. kept stable through the TVA's constant pruning of divergent branches. Its purpose was to prevent the rise of Kang variants, whose multiversal war threatened all existence. By eliminating any deviations that could lead to timelines where other Kang variants emerge, He Who Remains engineered a singular, safe timeline with minimal variance. This curated structure functioned as the backbone against which all other branches diverged. The sacred timeline is defined by strict determinism. Events unfold in a predetermined order because any unwanted divergence is removed before it has the chance to develop. When the Avengers executed the time heist, their actions, although disruptive, were implicitly allowed by He Who Remains because they did not jeopardize the overarching structure. The TVA refers to this as the path He paved. Their interference created branches but did not break the sacred timeline's long-term purpose. However, the sacred timeline becomes unstable only after He Who Remains is killed, because the pruning system collapses, eliminating the mechanism that enforced its linear structure. Without He Who Remains' control and the TVA's intervention, the sacred timeline no longer functions as a singular reality, but instead becomes one strand among countless branching universes. So there you have it. If you enjoyed diving into the madness, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into Marvel's strangest creations. Just maybe don't bond with anything you can't peel off later.